Welcome to your 20-minute podcast with David Brower, where we do our best to give you useful information in 20 minutes or less. Now, here's your host, five-time Voice Arts Awards nominee, David Brower.
Thanks, Ellen. This is David Brower with your 20-minute podcast. Our special guest today from Burlington, Ontario, Canada, is Edita Atteck, and she is fascinating story. We'll get into it with her in just a moment, but she gained 2 academic degrees, law and political science and history, but she always knew that she had a different purpose in life, and she's been able to kind of figure that out over the years to help professionals and folks like me and you alike. Edita, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Thank you so much, David, for having me.
Absolutely. So your latest book is Awaken Your Inner Leader, Transform Stress, Develop Emotional Mastery, and Thrive. And that's just the book. There's so many things on your website, but let's talk about the book first. How did that come about?
So this book, I think, has lived inside me for a really long time. And, I was one of those people from the time I was maybe a teenager. I always had so many questions about life and about things I couldn't understand and what breaks people down and what is it that's causing the people to fall apart or get into trouble. And I have always been sort of fascinated with the depth of the human being. And the reason for that, just very briefly, I was involved in a massive accident when I was at the age of 16. Although I was not hurt, there were many other people severely hurt in an accident. It was a tram going downhill into the center of the city. It was filled with teenagers going to high school and people going to work. And not going into that topic at all, but I think anytime we have a brush with death and tragedy, it sort of changes us forever. I was incredibly grateful that I was okay. Well, at that time, people thought you were okay when you're not physically hurt. I don't really think we had as much understanding as we have today. There's so much more that happens inside the body as a result of emotions, as a result of thoughts that come up, as a result of trying to even grasp the reality of what's happening around you. Yeah. So I think that has been a major factor for me to sort of go into these deep thoughts and deep questions about everything. And I think somewhere deep inside, I always wanted to give back, because the reason that I was okay, it was because I was protected by other people. Yeah. And so I think this has lived in me for a long time, but it took a really long time for that book to actually materialize.
I can't even imagine. It had to be, it's pay it forward for sure. It helps other people in many ways that they probably don't even know until they read the book, but it also had to be cathartic for you.
Oh, it definitely was, and it defined everything like I wanted to do. Like I really was always a huge warrior for justice and helping people and how to figure things out. But I didn't really know that although I was very academically inclined and everybody in school, they wanted me to pursue all these academic fields, I think deep inside, I was always a coach and a helper and a mentor. And I realized that the most powerful change we can create with another human being is through a deep, trusting conversation. And one of the other things I also discovered along the way was that there is something inside the human body which I refer to as the human operating system, because whenever I use any other terminology, people kind of just tune out. But when I put it into the computer language,
For sure.
I always say, if your operating system, whether you use a Mac or Windows software, is not working, It doesn't matter what other application you're going to put on, no matter what fancy software you're going to put on, it's probably not going to work all that well. And eventually it may not work at all, and eventually your computer may crash. And I think the similar thing happens with a human being, that we pay so little attention or even learn about the so-called human operating system, as I refer to, which is our nervous system.
Nervous system, right? Yeah.
That's right.
That's a wonderful way to break that out of the, nervous system. Okay, I'm going to take a nap. I'll be right back. But you get it into the computer language, the language of what a lot of professionals are curious about. That's brilliant. That had to give a lot of people, let's listen to that for a while.
It makes it definitely more easily digestible, because whenever people listen to neuroscientists and, you start bringing all the big language and all the hormones and everybody, it just kind of intellectually it hits you, but it doesn't really hit you deeper than that.
Yeah.
But now when you start thinking what can happen to your computer, maybe some kind of a similar metaphor can be applied to your human body. Now you start thinking a little bit deeper. So that was my hope. Anyway,
I'll tell you a quick story. My son was struggling in biology. He finally figured out his old 75 Ford pickup could be a metaphor for his biology class. Here goes the gas, here goes the oil, here comes all the workings. And all of a sudden it was like this giant epiphany where he's going, oh, I got that. Okay. He took the science out of it and made it something that he could relate to, just like you're talking about. It's fabulous.
Yeah. Well, metaphors are really powerful for our learning because they become so relatable. Mm-hmm. I was just listening to a video recently from a scientist who was researching, how human populations or cultures lived thousands of years ago, and mm-hmm. how they learned, how they stepped into adulthood. It was through metaphors, through pictures, through things that were easily relatable. And by the time they would go through this cave, by the end of it, they were actually, in a different version of themselves. It's kind of like you transform into somebody, and kind of like taking on a new identity. Mm-hmm. So I think metaphors are incredibly powerful.
Well, and I think the other thing that you mentioned early on in the conversation is a private, trusting conversation.
Yes.
And you got to slow down to be able to do that, right? You got to have, I don't know how you develop trust quickly with a stranger, but you must be able to do that.
And that, again, happens as, our nervous system is kind of like this apparatus that is sending out signals. And that's mm-hmm. why it's so much easier for us to connect in person, because we can actually feel each other. It can obviously happen on a call like this just through tuning into our voice,
sure.
through feeling the pause between the words, through our breath, through the prosody of our voice, because there are different ways of talking will put us into a different state, whether it's alert or whether it's, protective state, or mm-hmm. whether it's a state of ease. And so that's why I sometimes talk to, some of these high-performing professionals. Sometimes the tone of your voice and your prosody is going to change the atmosphere in the room that when you're talking to people. Because often we assume, especially in this digital world, that being present with somebody else is enough, but it's not.
It's not.
We have your nervous system and my nervous system right now are communicating. They have a little bit of reduced capacity because we are not next to each other. I can't see your face. I can't see the muscle tension or the relaxation. I can't see your smile.
Right.
But I hear your incredibly soothing voice and your calm pace. And that puts me at ease, and it's a lot easier for me to talk. But if we were to both speed up or were to talk in a different way, it would have a very different impact on both of us mm-hmm. and the listeners as well.
That makes perfect sense, because the softness of your voice has increased since we first started talking. And right? Did you know, you know that, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And the more we talk, the more it will become. So that's what I'm often saying to people. It's not just physical presence, it's the connection we are creating. And human beings thrive in connection. This is something I also talk to my professionals, also parents. Just being present with your kids or your spouse, it's not enough. Physical presence is not enough. It doesn't create a level of safety that efficient the running of the operating system. It needs to be a presence of connection.
Wow.
And without that connection, we don't really have the sense of, okay, everything, all the alerts can go down. I am functioning at full capacity right now. I can mm-hmm. see, I can feel, and I can consume the information.
I love that. And the other thing I've noticed in our conversation is I'm usually pretty relaxed during these interviews, I don't like interviews. I like these conversations, but it's interesting to me how, and maybe it was the yoga class I took this morning, I don't know, but it seems I'm just very, very relaxed talking to you. My shoulders are down, everything's comfortable, and for you to be in front of people in a speaking environment, on a stage, in a private session, you have a gift to be able to transfer your energy, if you will, or connect in such a unique way that it surprises people, I think.
Well, I think one of the most important things that I have learned and trained myself is to really connect myself and
Mm-hmm.
really feel my body. Like you're noticing your shoulders, they are down.
Yeah.
Our connection, because we are so often deep inside our intellect. It's like literally we are carrying our heads to meetings
Mm-hmm.
through our bodies, but our connection to our body, to feel our boundaries, to really be inside the body, feel our breath. I connect with myself first. And when I have that safety connection inside me and I know my operating system is functioning at an optimal level, then I can transfer that to others.
Brilliant.
And I know that through my approach, through my talk, through the way how I am being on the stage or in a workshop in front of people,
Mm-hmm.
that will have an instantaneous impact.
How do you get into that place, or are you always into that place? I can't imagine that you would be. I would think you would have to come in and out of it to a certain degree.
Yeah, I love that question. Absolutely. We cannot always be in that same place. And that's why there's something that I also explain in the book, how there's this oscillating pattern inside our nervous system. Like we generate activation energy, like in order for us to, let's say, perform to or physically run or to get excited about a project, we will be generating that activation energy.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually we reach the peak, and eventually we need to come down and we'll need to go into a relaxation place where we can digest and sit with friends. And eventually we go a little bit deeper where we can sleep and rest even a little bit deeper. And then our nervous system has the capacity to go even deeper than that when it's a life-threatening situation, or what the nervous system would perceive as a life-threatening situation.
Right.
And when it goes into this shutdown phase, which for many people who have not resolved some of their earlier issues in life, because it's not like an on and off switch, right? It's just going a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper. And sometimes people can confuse being too restful in a meditation. But if their nervous system is not functioning at the proper, oscillation flow, we can go up and you can release that activation energy, and you can go down, dip into the relaxation. They can sometimes dip too deep. And because it's their pattern, because it's something that they may have experienced early on. And that's why sometimes I've met people who have meditated and they did not feel well, or there was something still missing. So I think the most important thing for us is to be able to go through that flow all the time. Because I don't want to live in the state where I'm always like this. I want to experience a healthy anger if there is a situation that calls for it. I want to experience excitement. I also want to experience a situation where I sit with my friends, I eat a meal. I also want to sleep. And if I get into a dangerous situation, I want my system to go into that shutdown where it will protect me from feeling anything painful.
Wow.
The other thing is we need to have the
I'm sorry.
capacity.
I'm busy having goosebumps. Go ahead.
Okay, but we need to do. That's why the importance of understanding emotions and the concept of the nervous system is so important, because emotions are reasonably easily processed when we have that healthy base of the operating system. So even if I go deep, very down, like that's what, for instance, happened to me when I was in an accident, but it doesn't need to be so severe. You can be a small child and witnessing your parents to fight.
Sure.
You can't intervene. You can't run away. What your system will do, it will just dip you deep down so you pretend like nothing is happening. You don't hear anything. You don't feel anything. But then in order for us to be healthy, we need to be able to come out of that state. Just as much as some people get stuck at the top and they're constantly agitated, they're constantly anxious, or they're constantly, like A1 type 1 people who are constantly working very hard and they can't, sort of settle down. So there can be problems on the both ends. But we absolutely need to experience the flow. This is life. And the most important thing in my view and in my understanding and work with my clients is that when we have that well-regulated nervous system, then our body's prepared for a lot.
Yeah.
And handle a lot.
So when you're talking with somebody in business, high performer, and one is the classic A+, whatever, 120 miles an hour, their brain doesn't know how to shut off, very rarely. And then you've got the other high performer, maybe not as high, who had those kind of issues as a young child. Blocked out the parents fighting, blocked out different things, blocked out poor grades, blocked out different things. So, and you've got these people in the same room. How do you do that? How do you deal with that?
Well, when I am in a workshop situation, first of all, I explain it to them just for people to have an awareness of that. Like I remember one gentleman sitting in one of my workshops. He was involved in a family business, and I can't remember, he was the youngest of the 3 or 4 brothers. They all owned a business. And he said he doesn't know why it has always happened to him that his brothers were always like the ones who were guiding everything, who was directing everything. And there would be meetings and he would eventually just not able to say a word. Wow. And this has kept happening to him over and over again. And remember that this is a healthy, relatively speaking, healthy human being who is part business owner. So it's not like they are at a level of pathology where they need to be medicated or anything like that. This is just something where and he experienced that as a kid. And just that understanding, awareness alone, like he literally walked out from that workshop and he said, I really finally understand myself. Now, when you get to that high performer, he's like constantly wired. That he or she will have a hard time coming down, and they will always want to be working. These are the ones who work like 8, 10, 12 hours a day nonstop, and they can't go to sleep, and they wake up in the morning and they want to do something else. And for those, going straight into some kind of a meditative practice, maybe not the best thing to do immediately, because they need to learn how to regulate their nervous system first. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. There is never a one approach for all. You really need to understand as to where you are, what your pattern is, what patterns you have reinforced over your life, and then start from that understanding and then slowly apply these things until you get to that healthy flow. And it's a lifetime.
It's got to be a lifetime. It's got to be a work in progress forever, right?
We hope you've enjoyed part 1 of our interview with Edita Atteck.
Listen to Your 20-Minute Podcast with David Brower on the go. Downloads are available on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, any podcast app, and on our website at davidbrowervo.com/Your 20-Minute Podcast. Until next time, thank you for listening.